Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here for episode 25 of Cage Side Convos. I am Rick.
And this is Quince.
We're coming to you guys live, as always, from American Top Team here in Watertown. This week we're kind of, we're just going with it. We had an awesome conversation last week with our friend Fine Print Williams. And me personally, I was kind of riding the high off of that all week, and never really turned my mind purposefully to coming up with a topic for this week. So as we've done in the past, before I shot Quince a text message sometime yesterday, realizing we had the show today and we didn't really have any topics, and he kind of went, kind of was radio silent all day, and I knew as soon as I didn't hear right back from him that his mind was doing the same thing as mine. It was coming up with absolutely nothing. So finally, it was probably 10 o'clock last night. You ended up reaching out and said, what I had kind of figured had happened. You're like, I don't know. And I was like, you know what? Let's just go with it, man. Let's just go with it. Let's just turn the camera on and let's just talk. Which, interestingly enough, popped up some topics of itself is kind of what is flow? How do we stay in a flow state of mind, whether it's in our daily life or whether it's in specific activities, or how we can use specific activities like meditation or training to keep ourselves kind of in that zone, in that flow state, right? Mm-hmm. And I think kind of starting off and talk about maybe what it means to be in flow, in a flow state with your life. And I think that's essentially, for me, the way I think about it is living your life in a purposeful and productive way without succumbing to distractions, right? Not necessarily eliminating these distractions, but understanding that they exist, and even if we get pulled away from what we feel is purposeful or intentful or a good, productive way to conduct ourselves, we understand how to come back to that flow that we've found for ourselves,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's certainly being able to just be present and just being in general, kind of, in regards to the moment or a moment. Right. I think being in a state of flow helps you understand what a moment feels like and the value of that. Right. And, just looking back, this is something that I've always gravitated to ever since I was younger. Recognized first and then gravitated to it as I, got older. And, that led me to think maybe where that came from. And, ever since I was a really little kid, I was an overthinker. Sure. I would think I would think myself out of a situation, and I'd end up very beside myself. And it would make me very anxious as well. Staying in my head too much. So I think, and which became burdensome, in relationships and different situations at school, trying to pay attention, things like that. And the first time that I remember coming into this state of flow, for me, I think was it was through sports. I used to return punts in football. And they'd kick the ball to you. I'm looking up at the sky. I'm watching the ball come my way. I'm looking forward. I'm watching everyone running my way, and so it was very exhilarating. And last thing I would remember was just the ball almost dropping into my hands, and then that's it. I wouldn't remember anything else. Yeah. Until we watched the film on Monday, and I saw what would happen. Right. And I would just completely black out to the situation, and it interests me so much. I was wondering, why does that happen? How does that happen? How am I even thinking without thinking? I'm not, how am I aware? I'm sure plenty of times you guys have probably driven in a car and wondered an hour later how you got to where you were,
That's a little scarier.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. Sure. But, so that was the first time that it kind of stood out to me. And I would try and find different situations in which I could bring on the state of flow. And there were times when I was younger that I'd find it in some drugs, like smoking weed. Sure. Made me feel like I was right in the moment. So I would chase things like that. until I got to the point where I knew this had to be something outside of these chemicals. I knew it had to be something within us that we had.
Right.
And so breaking some of those habits, I had to better understand what flow was. And as I looked into it more, I was kind of led to like the Taoist definition of flow, which is Wu Wei. I think I'm saying it right, Wu Wei. And it is, they call it effortless action,
right.
Which I thought was pretty well put. Effortless action. There are people that say, people get into their state of flow after they've practiced their art or their profession or whatever for 10 years to where it becomes automatic.
Right.
So it's almost like letting your body get into this automatic state where you don't have multiple focuses going on at once.
Right.
You're letting everything just kind of flow through you, or you flow through life.
Right. Yeah, and so you talk about in sports, right? So specifically, returning punts or whatever, you found that state of flow. I've definitely noticed that in competing, in fighting, even in jiu-jitsu competition matches and stuff. And we have this practice in jiu-jitsu. It's called flow rolling, right? So basically, the intention is to put essentially 10% effort into your movements, and that way you start to feel and learn where the openings are.
Right.
And especially if you have a training partner you do this with consistently, because once you hit something, you hit a dead end or you hit a blockade in your movements, there you have two options. You either increase your intensity or you go around it.
Right.
You accept that it's there and you go around it. So if you want to keep your energy expenditure low, if you actually want to flow, you have to learn to feel these movements, to feel where you're going to run into trouble, or to understand how to circumnavigate that, how to go around.
Okay.
And when you have a training partner that you do this with all the time, and you get to learn each other and you can predict each other's movements a little bit better, and you find a really good flow. I remember the first time I did this with a good friend of mine, Eddie Stevens. We're still relatively new. I've been training jiu-jitsu for 6 years. He's been training, I think, for almost 4. 3, 4. I don't know. A couple years less than I have. But
sure.
Yeah, so we're not super experienced in the art right now. We're not at that 10-year mark or anything, but we train together all the time. And one Saturday morning, it was like 6 o'clock in the morning. We're just sitting there training. We're just flowing, getting warmed up and stuff. And next thing you know, it was 10 minutes later, and everything was smooth and effortless. And we had fun, and we were both learning new things always. And your body is just acting without thought. And that's a very it's a very exciting physical manifestation of that, or that blackout feeling, like from fights. I go back and watch footage of the first fight I had. It was over in a minute and a half, and when I was in the moment, I thought it lasted forever. But then I watched the footage, and it was over in a split second. But even though I thought it lasted forever, I couldn't remember any of it until I watched the footage. So it was this bizarre, happen fast and slow at the same time kind of state. But that's I think another thing of flow, when your body's just acting, your time perception changes.
Yeah, I mean, that's just how powerful the mind is, as far as how it works. And there have certainly been other instances in which I would black out. I remember my first show, first like actual show. It was over at Flashback Lounge when they first opened up. And there was no stage before the stage, so I was like right where the crowd was. Everybody was very close. As soon as the music hit, I blacked out then too. But since these instances, and the more that I'm able to practice that flow state and get into it myself, I notice that if I don't black out, I can feel the time slowing down, and I can feel these movements, and there's a real subtleness to it, and it's just so, it's invigorating. It's a different way to see life, because beforehand, I was only able to reach these states through high intensity situations, whether it was returning punts or getting into this actual combat, or being right front and center with these shows. So like that adrenaline or that energy kind of put you in a state of flow. Your body's just reacting to that. But certainly the more that it's practiced, not only can I reach that state, but I can also make use of, I'm aware of being in that state. And I think that's the sort of flow that I'm really trying to obtain.
Yeah, that I think a lot of musicians, myself included, have felt that kind of flow state when you're performing, right? And when you're doing it with a live band, you hear guys say like, we were really in the pocket on that one.
Sure.
Which is an amazing experience in and of itself, because not only are you in a flow state, but the 2 or 3 other members of the band are there, and you're all there together.
Right.
And it's just, it's an out of body experience, I've found myself doing that before, where especially if I'm playing with guys that I've never played with before, if we're trying a song, if we're just jamming or something, a lot of times I'll watch the guitarist, and I can see the chord shapes and where he's shifting on the guitar, and I can kind of follow until I get the groove and the movement of the song and stuff. And I'll notice myself playing a song I've never played before with guys I've never played with, maybe a song we're just kind of making up on the spot, and just knowing and being able to predict where it's going to go or where it should go or where the music's flowing. And when you notice that, it's hard to not shift out of that state of flow and start thinking, right? So it's your body's acting without thought, right?
Right.
How do we put ourselves back in a flow state, right? So being in a flow state is moving without thinking.
Sure.
We start thinking about it, we lose the flow state. So how do we think? How do we figure out how to put ourselves back in a flow state? Because it has to be thought out, and there has to be actionable steps that we can take, right? Something you touched on is fucking being present. Jesus Christ, yeah. being present. Yeah, it's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and certainly these are things that you have to practice. You're saying how do we get back in the flow state? It's it starts with recognizing that something like this exists, and trying to be present in these moments. But then also, once you have a better understanding, and you don't even need a full understanding, but you have your own understanding of the situation and how it might come to you, you need to practice these things. So a lot of these things that bring on this flow state are things that I try and make part of my everyday life now. Whether it is meditation or freestyling or running or like dreaming, trying to be aware when I dream. All of these things help me to quickly get back in this flow state. Because it's not gonna, it can last from anywhere from 5 seconds to, who knows how long. I'm sure people who are practiced can keep it going for quite some time. But I would say practicing flow states in ways that you understand it help you to get back in this flow state. But do you think it's something that can be demanded of the self?
So for me, I don't think we can demand, I don't think we can force ourselves into that flow state. So kind of like you said, if you have certain things that will put you in that flow state, whether it be writing or playing music or running or whatever, certain things that okay, if I keep doing this for long enough, eventually I'll hit that flow state. Sometimes that practice in and of itself is enough. For me, the practice of being present and finding ways just kind of throughout the day just to practice being present. So one thing I like to do when I'm pumping gas, especially when it's wicked cold out and it seems like the gas pumps are running slow and you're going to be there forever, is catalog the scene around me. As I'll look around, I'll know, okay, what color is the paper that these advertisements printed on? What color is the car at the pump over there? What's the price of gas right now? And just catalog specific details. Looking around and thinking, okay, how does the wind feel on my face? How do my hands feel now that they're freezing cold? Just taking in small details. And I do the same thing if I'm trying to sleep at night. Because you mentioned lucid dreaming real quickly. One thing I found that if I'm more present when I fall asleep is that I have a better experience trying to lucid dream, or I have dreams that are more relevant and more vivid and I can remember them. I learn a lot of things in my dreams. I've woken up in the morning and had to write down like a combination I dreamed up in my head for kickboxing or mentally rep out a concept I thought of for jiu-jitsu or something like that, or resolve the conversation I've had with somebody in my dreams. But it's gone, I think, from the practice of being present as I go to sleep.
Right.
So as I'm laying there in bed, I'll listen to the sound. This time you hear the heat kicking on.
Right.
Or when it kicks off, I'll listen to the silence. I'll listen to the creaks in the house. I'll listen to the wind blow. I'll feel, try to feel the blankets on my skin. Various different, any microscopic little detail, but that's going to put me in the moment.
Sure.
Because how many of us sit there at night and worry and wonder and think about the next day? Right. Even if you're not worrying, but being excited about the next day, that's almost harder, But you're living in tomorrow.
Right.
The Seneca phrase that I've been quoting a lot lately is, when hungry, eat, when tired, sleep.
Sure.
Which obviously, we do that, but when we're tired and we lay down in bed at night, are we really there?
Right.
Or are we thinking about the next day?
Right.
Maybe we're already somewhere else.
Or even worse, and this is a bad habit of mine, that instead of thinking about the next day or the day that just happened, I'll turn on whatever game is on, or I'll go to Netflix and I'll fall asleep to something like that, which doesn't even allow me to think.
Right.
It might slow my thoughts down in a way, but it's not an active. I don't think watching a game or watching a movie to fall asleep is an active. What do they call it? Well, it's just not an active thing.
Right.
So
it's taking you out. You're distracted. You're putting yourself in the TV.
Yes,
essentially.
it is a distraction.
Yourself,
Yes. Rather than teaching the mind how to rid distractions on its own, because I think really that's what it is. It's limiting distractions.
Right.
It's limiting what comes into your mind and how that affects you.
Right.
And being able to let those thoughts or those situations go.
Right.
Because you're 100% right. And I think about it like work. Think about being at work and all you're doing is looking at the time. All you're doing is thinking about where else you want to be, where else you should be. Yeah. And what does that do? What does that do to time?
It slows it down.
Slows it way down.
Yeah.
Slows it way down.
Yeah.
But if you can get into whatever it is you're doing in that moment and just be focused on just that one or those two things, you notice that time ends up just flies right by. And of course there goes that cliche you're looking for, time flies when you're having fun.
There you go, nice.
And whether fun, is the right, you jot it down? Is that for next week?
I am.
Whether or not fun.
Yeah, we're good. Sorry about that. Network cut out real quick, but I don't know. We're good. Looks like we're good. Yeah, it's still good. Still flowing, man.
But the thing that allows you to get into that flow state is almost not as important as reaching there.
Right.
Like I said, it becomes its own reward, which I think opens my mind to, because I have certain things, like I mentioned, that help get me into that.
Yeah.
But I don't want to limit myself thinking those are the only things.
Right.
I think people can find their own flow states in different ways, and I think we can always expand, in the way that we reach that moment.
Absolutely. And so you've touched on distractions, a few times, right? And that's obviously that takes us out of the flow, our flow state,
Sure.
right? A way that I've heard meditation explained is not necessarily ridding ourselves of distraction, but understanding how to come back from that distraction. Yes. Something that happens to me a lot when I'm reading, and I think it's because I took a long stint off, right? I didn't read a book for several years of my life, and it's just been the past probably 2 or 3 years that I've been a little bit more avid with reading.
Right.
But I've created habits of distracting myself constantly, picking up my phone, getting on social media, turning on the TV, listening to music, doing all these things that are distracting from me from thinking clearly. And I let my thoughts wander and stuff. So I realized when I sit down to focus on a task, I'll be reading and I'll be really focused on the book and I'll be enjoying it. And then all of a sudden, I'll realize that I've read a page or two and I'm thinking about some other shit.
Yep.
And so I'm distracted, right? So essentially, some of these with meditation, thoughts have crept into my mind, distracted me from my task at hand, removed my focus. So to pull myself back in from that, I'll slow down how fast I'm reading, and I'll start enunciating the words in my head.
Right.
Actually thinking about that now, I think next time that happens, I'm going to try reading out loud to myself to really pull myself back into the moment, make it very real, and then go back to just reading in my head.
Sure.
And I think something like that it forces you to be, okay, these are what the words are, and almost like condescending to myself sometimes.
Sure.
Pay attention to the book, please. You're not a 6-year-old child. But so, and then I'll do that, and then I'll realize that I have no idea what the hell is going on, and I'll have to go back a page and pick back up from the last thing that I remember reading, and then that'll happen. But I find that the more I focus on being present, the more easy it is to get back into that flow state. And even things like running on the treadmill, which I hate cardio, I hate running. I hate being on the elliptical. You sit there and you look at the clock the whole time.
Right.
So what I'll do is I have different practices of listening to my breath, of feeling my gait and my strides on the machine, and I'll focus just on a spot on the wall, and I'll just focus on breathing and feeling and understanding that one point is my focus. That's my meditation place. And once I get there, it usually takes me about 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden I feel that I'm in that flow state. And then as soon as I realize I'm in that flow state, I'll get distracted.
Right.
I'll look at the clock again, but 2 or 3 minutes has gone by.
Right.
Which is a long time on a treadmill or when you're running and stuff, right? So just a couple of different things that I found to be very, very helpful, but they put us in the moment. They make us refocus on what our goal is and get rid of that distraction, shed that distraction. Even if it's only temporary, that's fine, as long as we come back.
Sure. Sure. And you're right. Same thing. What happens in a flow state is the same sort of thing that happens in a dream. You recognize you're in that flow state, or a dream. What happens when you think to yourself, "Hey, wait, I'm dreaming right now."
Wake up.
Right? Yeah. You get excited and you take yourself out of it. You distract yourself. Yeah. But I think it's important, and I like how you said, when you're reading, you'll read it out loud. And that helps you kind of zone in on it. And I think it's very true, because you're connecting to your body in more than just one way, more than just that mental way. Because now you're saying it, and you're hearing the auditory. So you're saying and you're hearing what you're thinking.
Right.
And that draws you right in to the self a little bit more. And I think that's just been a practice for centuries. That people have mantras. Have you ever heard the term mantra? Oh, okay. Yeah. You're looking at me like. But anyway,
I'm in the flow state.
It's a repeated phrase that people use to help them hone in, to their center, and they could be religious mantras. They could be personal mantras that you create yourself, and sometimes people just use certain tones of the voice. To help them center back in.
Right.
So I think that's definitely good advice. Definitely good advice. I remember, and this was years ago, but writing my own mantra, and there wasn't even, they weren't even real words necessarily, but they were certain tones that represented something different to me. Like 2-letter tones, and to me, each one represented something different that I was aware of. So I would use this to help me quickly get back in the zone. Right. And this is something I could do anywhere, whether I was at work, out running, or wherever I needed to be to kind of reel myself back in, to that moment, so I could be present.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I like it, man. And sometimes, for me, sometimes it's just taking that breath, that cleansing breath. Shed the stress, especially when things are starting to get emotional. My mind is wandering towards emotional things, whether I'm getting sad or angry or whatever. But breathing it in, feeling that moment. And one thing I like to do, I guess maybe a mantra of mine, is tell myself, like, this is where I am. Like, I'm here right now. So I'll breathe in, exhale, and I'll say, this is where I am.
Yeah.
And whether I'm feeling anxious or depressed or whatever kind of height of the emotional spectrum, I feel better, and I feel immediately reconnected to that moment.
Yeah.
And I think little practices like this, and finding, again, so we've been talking a lot about specific things that we do to find our flow state, but I think overall this can give our life a state of flow. right?
Sure.
And we're calm when we're in a state of flow. We're happy. We're present when we're in a state of flow, and we want this for our whole life. I think these are things that we want all day, every day, right? Which is why we appreciate these moments so much, is because they're microscopic portions of your life that are in flow, right? But when we start combining these things and we realize that, again, if we use my definition of flow, it's living a purposeful life unencumbered by distraction, right? So if you're meditating, or if your purpose is to think on nothing, right? So you get distracted and then you come back to that, right? And the reason you enjoy that is because you're being purposeful and you're shedding distraction, right? For me, when I'm running, my purpose is to get it the fuck done.
Right.
And if I can do that, if I can accomplish my task purposefully, and I can do it without distraction, then I feel in a good flow, So if I spend 20 minutes on the elliptical and I only spend 12 minutes looking at the clock, that's 8 minutes where I was purposeful and intent, whether you're on stage, you're playing sports, you're fighting, you're competing, whatever, the less distraction you have and the more in that flow state you are, the better you perform and the better you feel afterwards.
Sure.
Right? So when you're doing this for life, right, just your day-to-day life, it's impossible to rid yourself of distraction. Right? But what we can do is control how we respond to distraction.
Yes.
Right? There's always going to be distraction. There's always going to be things trying to pull you in 1,000 different directions. And it seems sometimes, like, as you're getting closer to that flow state, the closer you get, the more things start pulling at you. And then once you're in the flow state, all of a sudden everything disappears.
Can't be touched.
Right.
Can't be touched.
Which, all the shit's still there. The outside world doesn't change just because we change. Right? But how we feel and how we approach it.
Sure.
Understanding what we can control, understanding how we respond to that, and not letting it derail us. And if it does, getting back
Bringing
to
it
that.
back. Bringing it back. Yeah. And and this is in part why, what's that?
Our boy Alex Slurry, this is why I don't look towards the future. I'll live for the present, because the future isn't promised to anyone.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, brother.
Yeah.
Very
I'd
true.
say so.
Very true.
Indeed, man.
That is
Indeed.
absolutely, you want to talk about stage performance and being in the moment.
Yeah.
Alex Slurry is
Sure.
definitely the man to go to for that. Man.
Absolutely. He's got that game face. You can tell he's in his zone because he's got that game face on when he's drumming.
Hell yeah, bro.
Yeah, that scowl. But and his eye, bro, your eyes aren't even looking at anything. They're just like looking off into the distance.
Miles away. Yep.
No, it's
Crushing
great.
it. Yep.
But and that's and for me, that's what I love most about music and art. I like the product of art.
Right.
But I've grown to love the practice of it the most.
Right.
Because it changes how it allows me the practice of finding that flow, that zone, and the more I do that, the more I understand what it feels like to be in it. So now I can walk myself backwards and allow myself to be in it in other situations, and that's really what I was looking for. Because now in just everyday life, to try and maintain this constant state of flow throughout your entire day, throughout your conversations, interactions, throughout the good and the bad, both. And you can adapt. Things seem to come at you differently. Your mind has time to think. It feels like your mind has more time to think about the not only what the situation is, how it came to be, maybe what options you have moving forward. And it doesn't come at you as quickly as it used to when I was a kid, overthinking the situation and taking myself out of that moment. Right. But now, my everyday life is one of almost art. Right. I don't say that to sound pretentious, but my goal is not to necessarily, these songs, keep putting out songs. Right. The goal is the practice. Right. Constantly find this flow, and for life itself to be art, and to be able to maneuver in whatever life throws at me. I can adapt to. I can make the best of. I can understand, learn from, and move forward. So it really has a lot to do with kind of slowing everything down around me. Yeah.
Absolutely, man.
And I think there's something for everyone as far as what helps them get into that zone. Or, you talk about a lot about fighting or combat or even practicing that. you know, your goal isn't necessarily to always get a fight in,
Right.
you know, every month or every couple months. But you're here every single day practicing and allowing yourself to better understand the flow.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I mean, the way you just explained it about practicing your art, that's exactly how I feel. I love practicing.
Yeah.
You know, you and I were playing with mitts today at the, you know, there for the morning workout, you know, running you through some of those drills and stuff. And stuff like that little 2-punch flow series that we did, that's what it's called.
Right.
You know, because we just focus on building it, and the more you work through it, the more your body starts understanding what the next movement is. What the next movement is. Next thing you know, 15 minutes has gone by, and I enjoy holding pads. I enjoy, you know, running people through it. I enjoy running the drills myself.
Sure.
You know, that's a lot of stuff my boy Peter and I were running through yesterday, and just moving and reacting to what the other person's doing. We were doing some of those counter drills and slip drills and stuff like that, and you're responding to what I'm cueing you to do. You don't know what I'm going to do. But I hit you and you react, and the more you let your body understand these movements and why we're going to counter a certain way, why we're inclined to move a certain way, the more automatic it becomes, and the better it feels. Right. And that shit's fun. It's exciting. It's exhilarating, and because we touch on that flow feeling, you know,
and it's freeing.
Yeah,
it's freeing.
Yeah, yep.
Just to dip back a little bit, and I was saying how it slows down.
Yeah.
Time, or it seems to slow down time, or at least how time is perceived. And I think that's why it feels so freeing, because essentially it's just time. All we have is time, and it gets shorter and shorter and shorter, and that can become a burden as the years pass, unless you learn to understand it or perceive it differently. So now time is relative. Yeah. Somebody said that. I don't know who. Probably some smart dude.
Some guy. Sounds like some Einstein shit.
But it's right. But it's relative. So if you're able to, within yourself, find your own speed within that time, I think that's, to me, what's freeing. Yeah. You know, that to me is what a flow feels like, or a moment is not being restricted by time.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, that's an absolutely beautiful way to put it. I've these past few months, I feel like my life is just like, every day I wake up and someone's like, holy crap, it's already the 21st of January. Like, holy fuck, yesterday it was August, you know? And it feels like overall time is screaming by, but my moments feel bigger. My moments feel longer and more in depth and more worthwhile. You know, every single day, I have a lot that goes on throughout the course of the day, but my days individually seem very, very long and very full and very freeing, and very engaging. And everything just feels it's amazing, you know, just to be in that flow state and know, like, each individual moment, like you said, is slowed down, but overall time's flying by, which is the most paradoxical thing you can say. Like, how's 10 minutes feel like an entire day, and then all of a sudden 3 months feels like a second? Yeah. You know, and it warps your perception of time a little bit, but I think that being in that moment, having each second feel significant, is, I mean, I think it's the best you can hope for. It
is the best you can hope for. And even that, I don't know how that sounds, but it reminds me of a conversation that I just had, and this was with a friend, and she was saying that she was talking with her friend, and you know, she was showing me this diagram. She's like, all right, so we live this long, and we don't really get the shit figured out till we're about halfway. Yeah. You know, and now once you figure out how to be happy, or what it takes to be happy, now you only have this much time left to be happy. Right. And so there seemed to be kind of a panic, you know, and I loved everything that she was saying, and it made sense, but then there seemed to be kind of this panic about, oh, there's only so little time left, so you got to do what's up. I said, but you have to understand, once you understand how that works for you, now time, exactly like you said, all those moments now in between are that much more significant, that much closely, closely felt. Right. And learn from, and you get to progress with these, and I think it feels different. So now this time, you don't feel it in the same manner anymore. Right. You know, if you're living for each moment, or not just for the weekends or what,
Right.
whatever it is,
Right.
it's going to feel a lot longer.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think we can help the fact that, one day we're going to wake up 70 years old and be like, God damn, that shit kind of flew.
Yeah.
I think that'll happen, but I can only hope that, we could take all of these, all this clarity, and all these moments with us,
Yeah.
as we go. So.
Absolutely, man. And you don't necessarily always remember conversation. You don't always remember events.
Right.
You may not always remember people necessarily, but you always remember how you feel.
Sure.
And
Sure.
that's a cliche that
Is
I've
that-
heard before.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, it was good.
Yeah, thank you. I wish that was that. That's mine. I made that up. I just made that up in this moment. But when like you said, I think, and this is what I hope for.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been 70 years old yet,
Mm-hmm.
so I've still got a few more years to go before that happens. And if I can say for sure,
Right.
but I would like to think that when I'm there, I'll remember feeling present for so many years.
Yeah.
Because I do right now.
Mm-hmm.
Even these past few months, I don't remember every single conversation I've had. I don't remember every day of training. I don't remember every drill I've done. I don't remember every technique I've learned. There's myriad things I don't remember, but I remember feeling present.
Sure.
And I remember being happy and
Sure.
being present. And when these distractions in life do come up, and a lot of times these distractions are bad things.
Mm-hmm.
It could be something as simple as you're having car trouble, or a close friend or relative dying. Your kid's getting sick. To try to reach a wider audience. I don't know what any of those things are like, but
Right.
it can be very distracting, and it can pull you right out of that flow state.
Yeah.
Those are hard moments, but in those hard moments, if you can find some way to appreciate the fact that you're there right now, whether even as something as horrible as being at somebody's deathbed,
Right.
Appreciate the fact that you're there and you're present. And if you weren't there, you'd have to be somewhere else. And if if it's a close friend, if it's a relative, someone you love passing away, would you rather be there? Or would you rather distract yourself and be somewhere else? You want to feel that pain and feel the significance of that moment,
Right.
because that's what you'll remember. And you'll
Right.
remember how important that person was to you. But if you distract yourself and you take yourself away from it, then down the line, you're going to wish you hadn't done that.
Sure.
And so once that, what could be perceived as a distraction from your flow state, you can embrace that and just understand and feel that that's part of your life, and appreciate that that's where you are, being here right now.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like we talked about before, distractions don't just go away just because you change who you are. Distractions don't pull you away from your flow state because of how you respond to them.
Right. Right. And, and I think you're 100% right. I think, we're not necessarily going to carry and be able to keep and retain all of these memories.
Right.
But I think the experience and what was felt stays with us. Whether or not the memory is there and readily available for, to talk about it, to communicate, I think the experience definitely stays with us because, essentially emotions are, vibrational.
Sure.
And I think those vibrations are like a guitar. I remember, I don't know if it was a movie or if it was a talk, but they were saying, every note of this guitar sends out a vibration and it's absorbed by the wood of the guitar
Right.
itself. He's like, so all of the beautiful music that's ever been played has been absorbed into this wood.
Right.
And they were saying, people are the same way. All of these vibrations that are felt, whether it's, that I'm felt, or there was kind of, maybe the love that's given to you, from others, or other situations like that, it's absorbed into the body, and it changes in ways your perception and your outlook and things like that. And whether that memory stays with you or not, the experience does.
Right.
I think we're constantly being changed. Certainly, if we put ourselves in the right situation to stay open enough, we're constantly being changed, and so we carry this with us.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very important to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like that, the vibrations and how you absorb it, whether you want to or not. You're
Right.
going to,
Right.
And if you embrace the fact that, again, this is what's happening. These are vibrations I'm absorbing. I'm going to carry this with me.
Right.
You have to learn how to construct that in a positive and purposeful light,
right.
you know, and knowing that this is going to shape you and make you better. If everything that happens to you is going to make you better, why disconnect from it?
Sure.
You know, why not embrace it? Why not feel those vibrations and absorb it? You know?
Or why put yourself in certain situations knowing that you
Right.
know what you're going to take away from there is not going to be
Right.
And I don't know if it's how relative it is, but you ever flip by like videos online of people getting hurt?
Oh yeah.
Like I can't do it. I
Yeah.
can't do it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you know, for me, super cringeworthy. I don't want to see people hurt first and foremost.
Sure.
Sometimes it's like an accident. You got to look because it's just something out of the norm. But really, I'm like, if I watch this, if I let myself watch this, when I close my eyes, I can see the shit perfectly.
Yeah.
You know, and even if I don't remember that I watched it wherever, it's absorbed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The mind takes it in, and
Right.
whether it causes slight anxiety moving forward, just
Right.
whatever, man. I'd rather not put myself into that situation. And
Right.
of course, there are a bunch of other things I could have probably put in that place, but that's one of the first things I think
Oh,
about.
absolutely.
You know,
In the same respect as that, because I'm the same way. I don't like watching videos of people getting hurt and stuff. What I've started doing is when I see a sad video or when I see some heart-wrenching news, and holy fuck, it's everywhere, man.
Yeah.
And it's easier to avoid it because you know right there, I don't want to absorb this. Like I don't want to, you know, right now, you know, I don't want to read about the Canadian military shutting down the indigenous people's protests and stuff up there. I don't want to read about the American internment of the Mexican immigrants and stuff, you know.
or Chinese with the Muslims. Or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, exactly, man. And this shit is heartbreaking. I mean, wherever you stand politically, wherever you politically align, nobody wants to see fucking starving kids or people being shot and murdered, and nobody wants to see this stuff, and
Right.
nobody wants to admit the truth to it because it's hard. So I've started making myself, when I see that, instead of just scrolling through it, I started making myself absorb that. And I found that I feel like I'm more connected and I'm more empathetic now when people have things going on.
Yeah.
And even, you know, people now that I don't, you know, necessarily consider I would, you know, agree with their stances on life or find them a good person or whatever. Now I found that through these practices of forcing these negative, what I would, you know, before say were negative things, like watching these sad videos and this gut-wrenching news and stuff, I found that I've able to put myself in a more empathetic stance,
Right.
understand people a little bit better. Even if I don't necessarily agree with them, I kind of understand where they're coming from, and it kind of makes me sad instead of angry at them.
Sure.
You know, I wish that these things hadn't happened in your life to shape you how you are right now.
Right.
I wish you could find this kind of empathy instead of, wow, you're a fucking piece of shit and
Right.
I do not like you. You
Right.
know, so that forced kind of engagement and that absorption of these sad and like negative vibrations and stuff, and these what I would consider, you know, atrocities or mistreatments of people worldwide. You know,
Sure.
worldwide, or you know, every fucking time you hear anything about American deployment overseas, and guys are coming back with flags draped over their coffins and stuff like that, and it's not easy to watch, or the guys that are, you know, are maimed and mangled from
Right.
from war and stuff, and it's easier to just ignore that, you know, or guys struggling with PTSD and suicide and all this stuff. It's easier to ignore that, but if you embrace it and you absorb those vibrations and stuff, it changes you.
It does.
You know?
And you know, and I hate the thought of senses being dulled.
Yes. Yes.
I hate the thought of becoming immune to a lot of these things. You know, and it's easy to when you have something like the 24-hour news system,
Yeah.
which honestly, you know, it's a business.
Yeah.
A lot of this shit is a business, and they got to make their money.
Yeah.
So they're going to constantly put out things that are distractions. People look for distractions when they don't want to, you know, when it's hard to deal with their own stuff.
Right.
So they seek out distractions, and honestly, that's a lot of what social media. I don't want to say it's all that social media is. It's
Right.
certainly not all that social media is, but a lot of that, you know, is just a distraction.
Yeah.
News is a distraction.
Yeah.
They know what is going to catch your attention. and usually it is some negative shit. I mean,
yeah.
you know, you'll see some posts of some heartfelt stuff that's shared, get a lot of views and things like that, but mostly it's the negative attention that people kind of gravitate to.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just human nature, or if it's just shock value.
Right.
But, you know, what shocks you today that you pay attention to is not going to shock you the same tomorrow.
Right.
So it's got to get, you know, they got to keep putting something worse and worse and worse in your mental, for you to stay connected.
Right.
And for you to stay distracted.
Right.
And I certainly didn't, you know, I don't think we're trying to sit and preach right now.
No.
But it's difficult because I think being able to find your own flow state is one of the most important things, one of the most gratifying things.
Right.
And if people are aware of that, and they make money from you not being able to get in your flow state, I think that's, I mean, it's a worse word than divisive.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. So I think that's why I bring stuff like this up.
Yeah.
Because it's important to be able to take yourself out of these moments. It is just for your health, your physical, mental, spiritual health and well-being.
Right.
So, you know, it's not just, you know, fun like hopping into a dream and being lucid.
Yeah.
And having it be a playground. Like, it's important for self, it's important for community to be able to do these things, and not be led astray. I would say, not be led astray.
Well, and that's it too. Is a lot of the divisive media, you know, and the worst language I ever see is left and right, Republican and Democrat, because every single time I read an article that propagates the people on the left are doing this, the people on the right are doing that, rarely ever is it completely factual. You know, and like you said, it's divisive because they want you to pick a side. They want you to align with something because they don't want you to think about what's being told. You know, and that sounds like some tinfoil hat wearing shit. You know, but it's true because 90% of the time, if you read into any of these extremely divisive articles, the truth is much calmer and much more mellow, and it's much more heart wrenching. You know, it's easy to get mad at people. It's easy to blame people, but it's not easy to accept the fact of what's going on.
Right.
And this is just, I think it's just another practice that ultimately leads us to being able to flow in life, you know, because then we don't get distracted by being angry. We don't get distracted by name calling and by blaming people. And then you find that you can have conversations with people you don't agree with, because if they start saying shitty things to you, that's a distraction. It's a distracting tactic. It's divisive, like you said, and then you can empathize from their end and say, okay, well, they're letting themselves get distracted from the point of this. I'm not going to get distracted, so this conversation is no longer productive.
Yep, but you can't do that unless you're able to, because first instinct, no matter what, your first instinct is reaction, retaliate.
Yep.
But if you can't come full circle and bring yourself back to that place in which you know you have the ability to grow or learn, or be fully present, then you're just going to be a slave to that reaction.
Which again, you know, it's not wrong to be distracted. It's not bad to give into distractions. It's not bad to end up away from your center. But you have to come back, and eventually, as you practice these things, a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about today, you learn sooner and sooner and sooner how to come back to this.
Right.
Because I'm absolutely, like, I've been a very explosive person before in my life, and been very reactionary and let myself react like that, and then it'll be hours or days or weeks or sometimes years later while I'll replay a conversation in my head and realize how distracted I was and how mean I was and how vicious and how unfair I was in these conversations. And now that I understand that I'm prone to do that, and in practicing, I still feel it crop up in me.
Right.
But I try to mitigate it before I expel some mean shit, you know. And especially it's crazy because you talked about social media. People have a tendency to people talk mad shit online.
Sure.
That's the simplest way to say it. And why? Like, it's not a knee-jerk reaction. You don't sit there and type out, 2-paragraph responses and knee-jerk reaction. You thought about that shit. You had time to not do that. You had time to put your phone down and walk away.
Right.
And we don't. We let ourselves give into those distractions.
Right.
And I've been just as guilty of it. And practice it and go back and say, okay, if I feel myself acting a certain way, I know I'm taking myself out of my flow state. Set it down, walk away, breathe, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a false sense of connection almost. I think people feel a little more free to, you know, type up whatever they like at a distance because, you know, I think if you're in the real presence of a situation and not the comfort of your own home or sitting on the fucking toilet or whatever, you know, you're forced to be a lot more aware of what's right now, whether it's who's in front of you, whether it's what they're saying and what you're saying and how that's being received and, you know, vice versa. So, you know, if you're not fully present, I think it's easy to type whatever you want for reaction. And you'll get that, but absolutely, man. It is important to be able to recognize when that's the case and pull yourself out of it, get back in your zone, get back in your flow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, overall, I find that the more temperate I can conduct myself in inflammatory situations, I mean, it's just like fighting. You know, if you react aggressively every single time you get hit, you're going to make a mistake and you're going to lose. You know, you have to learn, okay, when do I react? How do I react correctly? And let your body and let your overall goal for yourself dictate that. You know, whether it's winning the fight, whether it's coming out unscathed from an argument, you know, whatever, whether it's putting on a good show, whatever it is, you know, that notion of, okay, if I let this distract me, then I'm taking myself out of my flow state, and I'm not going to reach that end that I want ultimately.
Exactly.
And getting back to it every time you find yourself wandering away.
For sure.
You know.
For sure.
Oh.
100% agree.
Yeah, absolutely. That got pretty intense there for a minute, man. Yeah. Flow
just going with the flow, I guess.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. But that's you know, that was the whole point of it. You know, just kind of see where it goes.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for tuning in once again. This was episode 25.
25.
Which is dope.
Yep, we've got over the next couple months, we've already got a couple guests lined up that I'm pretty excited about. We're going to keep that under our hat a little bit, so you guys tune in next week, and maybe we'll tell you whether it's going to be the week after that or 2 weeks after that. So the next few weeks, we'll have another guest on. Pretty excited for, and until then, catch y'all next week.
Peace.